and more sustainable. Thank you.
I call the honourable member Shane Ardern.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Mr Chairman, if there was ever an example of why a bursary should be given back to a university and an apology should be sent with it for ever accepting it, the member that just resumed his seat is probably a good example. Harvard graduate, now returned from overseas as the new agriculture spokesman for Labour from the seat, I think, of New Lynn in West Auckland. Wonderful combination. And the last time the member spoke to a farmer was probably before he went off to overseas to further his education. So, Mr Chairman, why don't we look at some of the things that have happened? The member mentioned that there have been no new dogs trained. Well, I'm pleased to announce to the member that there are now 5 new dogs that have just been trained and made available in Wellington Airport alone, I understand, for the very purpose of what he spoke of. But let's talk about some of the bigger issues. Over $500 million of government and industry investment in the Primary Growth Partnership. Mr Chairman, if we look at how we can lift the standard of living in New Zealand, overwhelmingly it's going to be by growing the areas that we are best at, which is our primary industries, our agricultural exports, the exports from this country. And so how do you innovate and how do you develop products and how do you meet market expectations? Well, by investing in research and development. And so by developing the Primary Growth Partnership and investing now up to close to $500 million in that, it is I guess the single biggest contribution that the state can make towards growing exports. Tackling greenhouse gas emissions. I don't think there's anybody in the House that suggests that we shouldn't do everything we can as an export nation, as an agricultural nation, to look at how we can make a sensible contribution, not the Labor type, just tax and hope that something comes right, but a sensible contribution. And so by putting $50 million into the Greenhouse Gas Research Centre, then this, Mr Chairman, is much more likely to return a dividend on that investment. Our involvement, Mr Chairman, and the investments made in the Global Alliance on this issue, where New Zealand is now being described all over the world as a leader in this field. So just imagine that. Under Labor, where we were described as dragging our feet, not having an environmental policy, not looking forward in this area but looking backwards, we are now seen as leaders in the Global Alliance of Research and Development into greenhouse gas emissions. Mr Chairman, a very, very positive response from this government. 80 million in savings over 4 years from the combination of the industries that the member just spoke of before and suggested that somehow this was negative and somehow this was dumbing down our primary sector. Mr Chairman, I would suggest to you that just the opposite to what the member suggested is happening, and it's very good to see that. So what have we done here in the Parliament in terms of the legislative program that's going to be useful and part of this greater growth in the primary sector? Well, the passing of the Dairy Industry Restructuring Bill, or the Amendment Bill. Mr Chairman, there will be no greater investment in New Zealand's growth than the work that was done in enhancing what is the country's biggest export earner, which is our dairy industry. 26% of our exports come from that sector. And I note that someone from the Green side of the House or someone over here chimed in on that. Let's just have a look at what our opponents are talking about in regard to an alternative view of what we should be doing. The first thing they're talking about is a capital gains tax. I'd like to know how that will grow our export earnings, grow our primary sector. I've been interested to listen to the comments. Well, I have been. I haven't heard anything sensible. Higher income taxes, no support for irrigation, an agricultural admissions tax. Well, you know, how does that reduce greenhouse gases? A drop in farm values through the increase of taxes. No more 90-day trials for new employees. Rural New Zealand stuck in the dial-up age because they oppose the broadband rollout that this government is involved in. Less road construction. Less road construction. So how much? Well, look, you know, I've listened to the argument. I've listened to the arguments. I've listened to the arguments about how we could have better development by enhancing public transport. I'd like to know, Mr Chairman, how are you going to transport milk with public transport?
I call the honourable member Ian McKelvey.